has changed some things here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Martin with Silver Spring Town Center, and we are so excited to have you joining us for But I Digress, a fireside chat with Cherri Branson. And I know many of you know Cherri and know her, many of her insights that she shares on Facebook. And I thought that it would be an intriguing program, so we invited her to come and share her wisdom and stories with us. So you're in for a treat. Before we get started, I just wanted to share with you, Silver Spring Town Center is a 501c3 situated in the Silver Spring Civic Building, and we present over 100 free arts and entertainment programs and events throughout the year, including the Silver Spring Blues Festival. Monday, we have our art salon that's hosted by doll maker Camilla Bryce Laporte, and that will be on Zoom at 7 o'clock also. All of our events are made possible with generous support from Montgomery County, Montgomery College, United Therapeutics, the Arts and Humanities of Montgomery County, Maryland State Arts, and many others. And now let's get to the program. Cherri Branson, as you know, uses her Facebook page to tell stories and deliver inspiring messages. And she often uses the phrase, "But I digress," and hence the title of tonight's program, "But I Digress," a fireside chat with Cherri Branson. She was the only child of a single mother and transplanted from the country to the city during the turbulent 1960s and 70s. She's going to be sharing her stories from her childhood. As many of you know, Cherri Branson served as director of Montgomery County Office of Procurement between 2015, 2018, appointed by then County Executive Ike Leggett. During that time, she ushered in the highest level of contract awards to small and minority-owned businesses in the county's history. Prior to that, she also served on county council, and she had a very long, over 20-year long career on Capitol Hill, where she worked for trailblazing members of Congress, including John Conyers, Patsy, Mink, and Cardiss Collins. She's a lawyer with two degrees in law, a JD and an LLM. And has an impressive array of civic activities, including serving as vice president of Montgomery County NAACP. And she's also a member of the Charter Review Commission, Redistricting Committee, and founding member and past president of Montgomery County African American Democratic Club. She's the mother of one son and a stepmother of a daughter, and she and her husband live in Silver Spring, Maryland. Welcome, Cherri Branson.
Well, thank you, Lisa, thank you all for being here. You know, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your Friday night. And I'm glad you decided to spend it. You know, when Lisa first asked me about doing this, I said, huh? Why? What? And you know, you think anybody's really gonna want to sign on for this? This is just stuff I put on Facebook. And she's like, no, I think people would want to hear it. I was like, okay, well, you know better than I do. So I really want to thank you all for being here. This is and I want to thank Lisa for coming up with this program. It was certainly wasn't anything I thought about doing. I want to say that my for those of you who read my Facebook posts, I think they sort of proceed in like 3 categories, I think. One category is stories from my weird childhood. The other second category is homilies, which I sometimes are very um, religious based and sometimes are not. And the third category is really sort of stories of my ancestors, stories about my family. So I'm gonna be reading from each category, but I'm gonna give you sort of the background on each one. The childhood stuff, as I say, I was a transplant. My mother came to DC after having a job in Howard County schools. I was a school teacher, but she never wanted to leave West Virginia, and so she came to DC because she had to leave West Virginia, and that's one of the stories. So to give you the short of that is, it goes like this. When my mother, I was born when my mother was in college. So after my mother graduated from college, she did what you were supposed to do at that point, which was go to the local employment office in Jefferson County, West Virginia. Actually, I think it was in Berkeley County, it was one county over, and apply to be a teacher. That was in 1964. Or 63. And so she went and she met with, filled out the forms, and the woman looked at her, who was interviewing her. It's lovely daughter of the Confederacy. Look, we just not gonna have any jobs for colored teachers this year. And so my mother said, okay, you do understand. Okay, I'm not even gonna deal with this. So, but this was in, 1963 or 4, right? This was after schools had been desegregated. This was after they were supposed to be hiring people just to be teachers, and not Black teachers or white teachers, or just teachers. And so confronted with that reality, my mother said, well, I guess I will be leaving West Virginia. And so she did. And at first she went to Howard County, Maryland. Um, and she taught there for about a year, and left there because she was in a school where the principal decided that female employees could not wear shorts. that there was a dress code for female employees, and my mother was like, this is nuts. So she was able to get a job in DC, and she ended up working at what was then Western High School, which was in Georgetown. And after she got a job at Western, she came back to West Virginia and got me. And I was just about ready to start school. I was about to turn 5. And quite frankly, I did not want to leave, but it really wasn't my choice. I didn't have any choice in the matter. So my childhood was spent between, at that point we lived in Northeast we would a year or so later move to Southeast DC. So my childhood was spent during the week, traveling between Northeast or Southeast DC and Georgetown. So I went from, an all Black working class neighborhood, on the bus every day, over an hour, to a very wealthy white enclave. I got special permission to go to school in Georgetown because my mother happened to teach in Georgetown. And so every day I traveled between those worlds. And then on the weekends, I would go from DC back home to West Virginia. And holidays, Christmas break, all that, I'd be back home in West Virginia. So I'd be traveling between the city, and that part of West Virginia back then was pretty rural, I'd be traveling between all these different places in my childhood. And I think doing all that, traveling like that, not only gave me a lot of different experiences, but it also gave me a different perspective, because in a lot of ways, I was always present, but not really there. There was no place that was really like home except my grandparents' house. But I wasn't in it. I was like a visitor. I was always a visitor every place. And I think, having always felt like I was sort of a visitor, be a perspective that now is very helpful, when I write about these things, because part of writing is objective and part of it is subjective. It's really easy for me to remove myself from a lot of my stories, because even though I'm in them, I'm not really in them in a lot of ways. So anyway, so that was my bizarre childhood. Lot of traveling, a lot of moving around, and it was every day. I find in my adult life that a lot of my friends are from military families. We have a lot in common in a lot of different ways. But anyway, so let me tell you these stories. Before I came to DC, my my babysitter, when I from the time I was 3 till I was 5, was my great grandmother, and she was my babysitter. And she was my babysitter because she was the only one who wasn't working or in school, and so somebody had to keep me, and she did. And she used to, my days would begin, first of all, fighting with her about me not eating oatmeal. That was a daily fight. And then watching Jack LaLanne, because she believed that I needed to always exercise. I think she was trying to wear me out. And then and then she would start telling me stories. And she would tell me stories about her life, about our ancestors. She would tell me stories about slavery and the Depression and Prohibition. And when she told me stories about slavery, she they would always start, well, back in slavery time, tell me a story. And they would always end this way, but we were never slaves. And I was probably in my 20s before I figured out what she was talking about. Because even though she was telling me stories about our family and things that had happened, in slavery, she wanted me to get the message that we may have been enslaved, but we were not slaves. And I'm pretty sure that's where she was going, because one of the things I remember, my great grandmother died when I was 5 years old. She died right after I left to go to school. But one of the things I remember her telling me was that, she asked me one day, what's the one thing that you can never, that no one can ever take from you, you have to give away? And I'm like, okay, this is another grandma riddle. I don't know what. And she said, your dignity. Now, I'll be the first to admit that at 4, I did not understand what dignity meant. And she knew I didn't understand what dignity meant. But she also told me, if I tell you anything you don't understand, just remember it, it'll come clear later. And that's exactly what it did. I mean, I would grow up and, learn things, and I understood what dignity meant. And so I understood what she was saying, that, that people may do things to you, that the world may mistreat you, but what you do not have to ever give up in all of that is your dignity. And so let me tell you the story. It was the summer before my 7th birthday. My mother was accepted in a summer program at a school in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. We left our apartment and boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Wilkes-Barre in the wee hours of the night. We arrived in Pennsylvania at around 11 a.m. So when we got to Wilkes-Barre, we go to the student housing office to get our keys, and they told her no. As a woman with a child, she couldn't live in student housing. As a single woman with a child, she couldn't live in married housing. I was 6 and I really didn't understand what was going on. We ended up in the school cafeteria. And as we stood in line, she started to cry. Okay, I'm 6. I'm in a strange place, and my mother is crying. And so this man asked her what's wrong. And that's when I heard the entire story about the housing situation. Well, it turns out this man was a priest. And he brought our lunch. The school, the college, was a Catholic college. And so that's why, this priest was hanging around the cafeteria. He taught there. So this man bought us our lunch, and about 15 minutes into the lunch, he writes some stuff on a napkin. He hands it to my mother, and he says, go here. They'll take care of you. It was an address and a map. And so we went, dragging our luggage behind. Walked about 4 blocks, and we ended up at a very big Victorian house. And she knocked on the door, and a nun in a full habit answered the door. I should jump off and digress a little bit and tell you that up until that point in my life, I had never seen a nun in a full habit. I was like, and when she with the Victorian house, I was like, oh heck no, I'm not going on, but I will not be part of it. And so she handed her the note, and we went in. I sat outside in the little entryway, and my mother and the nun went into a room that looked like a library or something. About 10, 15 minutes later, she came outside. As I was sitting there, I was marveling at the size of the house because I had never been in a house this big. I I was taking in the wood paneling. It was dark, and even though it was summertime, it was cool. It was very different. But anyway, at the end of the meeting, my mother took me by the hand, and we went upstairs, and we were shown our room. It was about 12 by. It had twin beds, had a desk, bay windows, and a couple of chairs, and the bathroom was down the hall. There happened to be a YMCA across the street, and they had a child care program, and I was enrolled at a very minimal cost. So this is the summer that I lived in a convent. I went to the daycare at the Y, and I learned how to play frisbee because the nuns taught me. This was a convent where there were a lot of novitiates who were there that summer, women who had not taken their final vows. And so, and they were all pretty young. So, having me around was like having a little playmate. And so they would come pick me up from the Y. We play frisbee. It was, and used to like to take me to the movies. So, so there was, I would talk to her every day, and every day I would ask her why she wanted to be a nun. And every day she would give me a reason. And every day I would tell her, you don't need to be a nun for that. Well, so why you want to be a nun? I want to help people. You don't need to be a nun for that. Why you want to be a nun? I want to teach. You don't need to be a nun for that. What this went on every day. And I'm 6 years old. If you can't explain stuff to a 6-year-old about why you need to take your vows, you may need to rethink some of that. So, so apparently she did. And she ended up not taking her vows. She ended up leaving. Actually, she ended up marrying a priest. She wrote my mother later to tell her that. A priest who decided not to take his final vows either. And so, later my mother would tell me, we were not Catholic at that time. Later my mother would tell me, you owe the Catholics a couple. You owe the Catholics at least one person. so you need to figure out how you do that. And I was like, yeah, right. So at the end of the summer, when she got married, she became a social worker. She gave me a stuffed animal. We got back on the Greyhound bus, went back to DC. And when we got back, we moved from we moved from Northeast to Southeast. And a whole new chapter of my life would begin when we moved to this other apartment complex. So, if you're still with me, that's all very interesting, bizarre, but what does it really have to do with anything? So here's what. Our initial predicament was changed because my mother cried. Sometimes our situations can only change if we are vulnerable and able to express our needs. Pride may prevent us from receiving the kind of help we truly need. Living in a convent is not what I expected, but was one of the really most fun experiences of my childhood. So You shouldn't let your preconceived notions keep you from experiencing life in the moment. Finally, I was not trying to block someone from becoming a nut, but her willingness to be open and to think about her life path, the expectations, and how she should pursue her heart's desire may have changed her life. And so, with all those things, for me, the message is to always be open. You know, my mother cried, she was open. We lived in a convent, totally new experience. And we met this woman who changed her life path. Always be open. Oh, and by the way, I kept asking her this question, not because I have some great insight into other people's souls or anything, but I was 6 years old. And for me, it was really just a fashion issue. I was always a bit of a diva. And I didn't understand for the life of me why anyone would be willing to wear a habit for the rest of their life. And to me, that's the commitment she was making. She was habit wearing. And 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 you know, she really should have asked me why I was asking her that question. But she never did. So that's the other lesson. Somebody asks you a question, ask them why they want to know. Anyway, you know, my life has been really full of a lot of serendipitous events. Yours probably has been too. But at some point, you realize that the random occurrences have made you who you are. And I hope that you have the same gratitude for the random stuff that I do, because I know that these random events are connected, they are guided by God, and they deserve my gratitude. I am reminded always of the words of my great-grandmother. Anything that don't make sense, remember it. It'll come clear later. So I ask you to embrace all the random stuff, because life is full of random stuff. Get through it and live to tell the story. So, end. I want to stay in my childhood. I want to tell you about when we first moved to Northeast. Um, um, and I'm going to read this one straight, because this one ain't easy. Right before I turned 5, my mother came to take me to DC. I was about to begin school, and she didn't want my life chances to be determined by a newly integrated school system that she did not believe would encourage excellence in a young Black girl. So I immigrated from a rural environment where I knew everybody to an urban environment where I knew no one. I traded a house with a yard for an apartment building that spanned a block, had stores on one side and a concrete courtyard on another. The building was about 8 stories, and ours was 1 bedroom that looked out on the front courtyard. The building was on the intersection of Rhode Island Avenue and 13th Street. It was called the Plaza. It had a big lobby, a switchboard, a lounge area, and what we now call a concierge. I think his name was Mr. Charles, but I'm not real clear. But he staffed the desk, and he was everybody's friend. My Aunt Brenda lived with us. And I was totally mesmerized by the radio. It was 1965, and it was Motown, and the world was about to change. And I really thought that there, well, I didn't realize it then. But I know now in that moment that I was kind of standing on a precipice of some stuff. But I digress. I was riding the elevator in the building. I loved riding the buses and going to the movie theater that was right across the street. I loved the country, but I was also really okay with the city. I made friends with two boys, Charles and Stanley. Charles was dark brown and plump, like Spanky and the Little Rascals, and Stanley was light-skinned, skinny, and cross-eyed. These were my friends. We were all the same age. We all went to school together. And there was only one problem. My mother had to work. Somebody had to take care of me. And that's what this story is really about. I was in kindergarten, and my mother arranged for me to stay with Mrs. Red. She dropped me off in the morning. Miss Redmond would walk me the block and a half to school. At noon, she would be waiting for me outside the school. We would walk home, all pretty normal stuff, except for one thing. This is a Black neighborhood, and Mrs. Redmond was white. Several of my classmates accused me of having a white mother because she would pick me up. And luckily, Charles and Stanley would support my claims that my mother was not white. But once again, I digress. So Miss Redmond would pick me up. We would go back to their apartment, and I would watch TV or play outside. She would make dinner. She and I would talk. Mr. Redmond would come home. Mr. Redmond was Black. He worked at the post office, and he was Catholic. And he would come home and get on his knees and pray at an altar set up on a side table in a corner that had a very small crucifix and an image of the Virgin Mary. He would take out his rosary beads and pray on his knees. We would be silent. He was the first Black Catholic I would encounter. The Redmonds were about the same age as my grandparents. So they were in their 40s. They had no children. He had served in World War II. She was a German. And like many American GIs, he had married a woman from Europe. Unlike most American GIs, their marriage was illegal in most places in the United States. It was 1965, and the laws against interracial marriage would not be struck down by the Supreme Court until 1967. Like most Black children raised in a post-segregation world, I had little contact with white people. They lived on a planet that we did not inhabit. I can honestly say that the only other white woman I knew at the time was the white woman my grandmother worked for. And my grandmother was a maid. But I digress. Mrs. Redmond called me Liebchen. She made me schnitzel. She taught me German. This childless woman who had gone from Hitler's Germany to American segregation truly loved this Black man and truly loved me. And she truly loved the notion of having a child. And with all that love, she taught me German. And that was a deal breaker. One day, as I was leaving their apartment with my mother, my 5-year-old self just had to show off. And so I began speaking German. My mother turned and looked at me and asked me what I said. And I repeated it. And I asked her, and she said, "Do you know what that means?" And I gave her the English translation. The next day, I hear the blow up between my mother and Mrs. Redmond. I hear Mr. Redmond trying to explain that no harm was intended. I hear Mrs. Redmond ask my mother to let them have me. And I hear Mr. Redmond, who understands the history of white people trying to take Black children, and understands how my mother is going to perceive this, trying valiantly to calm everybody down. And I hear these two women who both genuinely love me locked in a horrific battle. And all my 5-year-old mind can understand is that I love them both, and I probably shouldn't have spoken German. So after all the drama, this is how it ended. My mother found another babysitter. My time with the Redmonds was over. If you hear something whining, that's my dog. Nobody could figure out, nobody in the situation, no matter how much they cared about me, could figure out how to truly lead with love. And the weight of all of everybody's history and everybody's individual needs drove each of their agendas. So here's the message. Love requires compromise. Love requires walking somebody else's shoes. Love requires listening beyond words. And this incident taught me how complicated love can be. And mostly it taught me this. Love is all that matters. And all that stuff in our personal histories can cloud the truth that love is. But it's up to each of us to get beyond our personal hurts and hang-ups to the universality that speaks our truths and affirms our humanity. So to recap, nobody here was wrong. A single mother was trying to keep her child. A childless couple wanted to give a child a home, and it wanted a stable life. Anyway, I still love Redmonds. I remember crying when I was in law school and I read the case of Loving v. Virginia, because that was a case that struck down the laws that forbid interracial marriage. And yeah, I can still remember a couple words of German, and I ultimately became Catholic. So that's all. Always remember to lead with love. Peace. I hate to do this, Lisa, but I'm going to have to ask you to do something because my dog is whining. He's got to go out.
Okay.
And if I don't let him out, he's
great. So
really bad.
Okay,
So,
we'll take a bio break for
thank you for Ace.
For
the Ace break.
For Ace and anyone else for just a moment. And we'll have time at the end for maybe discussion too, or if you have any comments or questions,
yeah,
you're free to put them in the chat.
This takes a total 5 minutes. I just have to open the door. I just have to open the door for him. I just have to open the door. I'll run right back. So I'll be right back.
Okay, just be a moment.
Okay, I'm back. Ace is happy. He usually lets himself out the door, but unfortunately, somebody locked the door, so he couldn't let himself out. And so I want to tell you now the babysitters, what I call the babysitters part 2. So I've told you about the Redmonds and the summer I spent with the nuns. I told you about the good stuff. It's the stuff that made me believe in the goodness of people and love, and the stuff that I was blessed to know. But life's not always about sunshine. Sometimes there's rain, and that rain is also a part of who we are. So this story is about the rain. So here we go. After my mother removed me from the care of Mrs. Redmond, she placed me with another babysitter. By that time, I was in first grade. We lived in DC, same neighborhood. This babysitter didn't live in our apartment building. She lived in an apartment complex about a block away. It was a group of buildings that were low-rise apartments with a courtyard and dogwood trees. The buildings were painted white and had black shutters. There were about 10 buildings that faced the courtyard, and there was a common sidewalk that connected them. My mother would walk me to the babysitter's building, walk me up to the stairs to her second-floor apartment, and leave me with this woman and her children. At some point, my mother started dating this man who actually owned a limousine service. And so he would pick us up and drop me off at the babysitter's house before driving her to work. I would exit the car, walk through the courtyard and up the stairs to the apartment. Y'all want to know why I became a diva early? Okay, that's part of it. So, but I digress. The babysitter had 3 daughters. She also kept a little boy who was about 3. And she kept me. She and her daughters were light-skinned and had straight hair. I mention this only because it was the first time in my life I had encountered colorism. She and her daughters seemed to embrace the notion that the hue of their skin made them somehow better. But I digress. So I would walk to school with her daughters. One was younger than me. The other 2 were older. And the oldest was in about the 5th grade. The trip to school was usually uneventful. This little trio, but it was a trip back to the house that was always difficult. Back at the house, mother would always require quiet. So from 3 to 5, I would sit and watch TV. She would yell at the little boy, and we would all watch Bozo the Clown or whatever was on, and that was it. The slightest infraction will be met with and cursing. She called us all stupid on a daily basis. And in this female-dominated world, that little boy caught a particular kind of hell. I was never quite sure, but her husband had either died or had left her. So she seemed to have a special kind of torment for that little boy and a special need for the money she earned from babysitting. But I digress. So this went on for about a month or 2. And then the thing happened that I couldn't tolerate. On the way home, the oldest girl kicked me in the back. I told her not to do it again. And then she used the full force of her foot and kicked me with such force that she knocked me to the ground. She was about 10 or 11, and I was about 6. She laughed. Her sisters told me to shut up. When I got back to the apartment, I told her mother what she had done. She denied it. Her sister said nothing. Her mother called me. I sat and I waited for my mother to pick me up, and I told her. Again, the babysitter called me a liar. On the walk home, I told my mother that I wasn't going back to that place. She told me I had to, and that's when she got to meet me. The next day, she dropped me off. I walked to the building. I waited until I thought I heard the car had left, and I sat on the stairs for a few minutes. And then I walked out of the building and walked myself to school. At the end of the school day, I went to our apartment building. I sat in the lobby. I chatted with the concierge, and I waited for my mother to come home. When she arrived, she was clearly panicked. She had gone to the babysitters to pick me up, and had been told that I wasn't there and had never arrived that day. She asked me why. I reminded her about the bullying and the physical attacks and the yelling. I reminded her that I wasn't going back, and I told her I meant to. We were at an impasse. I asked her about returning to the Redmond. She said no. She asked me about returning to this babysitter. I said no. I was only 6, but I knew what abuse looked like, and I wasn't going back. Next day, she takes me back to the babysitter. She had a job. Childcare for me was necessary. She believed that things could be worked out. She confronted the babysitter with my allegations. The babysitter denied them. My mother left, and I'm there with this horrible woman and her mean daughters. And within a minute, she starts to scream at me. She called me stupid. She tells me that her daughter should have kicked me. Unfortunately, she should have waited because my mother hadn't gone down those steps yet, and she heard every word of it. Every word. I heard a knock on the door, and it was my mother. She didn't say a word to the babysitter. She just told me, come on. She took me to school, to her school she took me to my school that day. I walked home with Charles and Stanley, and she said she would work it out. She did. My next babysitter was Miss Taylor, who was tall and thin. It's a dark-skinned woman. She had really long fingers. She was a nurse, and she absolutely loved popcorn. And every day we would sit and we would watch TV and we would eat popcorn. I love Miss Taylor. But you may be wondering now why I can tell you Miss Redmond, I can tell you Miss Taylor, but I just keep telling you the bad babysitter. And that's because really for the life of me, I can't remember this woman's name. It's like I had blocked it out. In my mind's eye, I can see her face as clear as day. I can see faces of her daughters, the layout of the apartment, but I have blocked out her name. Just like when I was 4, my dog get hit by a truck. And I know I saw it because in my mind, I heard myself scream. But to this day, I can't remember it. I blocked it out. See, and really, I hope I never do remember. Because there are some things that are just too painful to recall. But I digress. So if you're still with me, you may be wondering, what's the point? It's this. I learned early to refuse to let people treat me badly. I learned early that the answers may not be apparent, but you have to take a stand, even if no one believes you. And I learned early that some people are just plain mean. But mostly, I learned early that you may not be able to have what you want, but you have to fight for what you need. And that is the message. Never be afraid to fight for what I've been doing it ever since. And my life has been made possible by my willingness to fight. So in some really messed up way, that woman and her mean daughters taught me an important lesson. I really wish I could learn it differently, but I did learn it. So I'll give you what I learned at 6. Don't take no BS. Call it out. Do what you need to do to get away from it, and don't give up. As my great-grandmother told me, there ain't but one thing no one can take for you. You have to give it away. And that thing is your dignity. I didn't know what that meant it for, but I knew what it meant. But I learned what it meant at 6. Anyway, the fight is hard, but it's worth it. And never give up. Peace. So those are the stories of my crazy childhood. And so I'm gonna go to the homily section of my crazy stuff. And the reason, some of you may know this already, but I started writing homilies really for my own amusement, quite frankly. when I worked on Capitol Hill, I used to be a lot of times I would write speeches. I worked for a member of Congress, and I started off writing, his speeches. I would write his speeches, and he had this other guy. He was also a minister, and he had this other guy who wrote his sermons. Well, this guy got a job somewhere else, and it would have been a conflict of interest for him to continue to write sermons. So he comes to me and he says, "Cherri, you think you can write a sermon?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? I'll try." And so I did. So now mind you, the other guy who was writing sermons was getting paid for it. This all got folded into my other duties as assigned. So so here I am writing sermons for free. And I thought I'd maybe write a couple and that'd be the end of it. Well, apparently the sermons I wrote turned out to be kind of popular. So that became part of my regular job. Then I stopped working for him, and life goes on. I ain't writing any more sermons. But so I started to find myself in church. And we had a change in priests and everything. And I would leave and I would be like, "Wow, this is really not hitting it for me." And went around church hopping, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is not hitting it for me. There's some stuff that's not hitting it for me." And so what I started doing in my own head was writing my own homilies. And like, this is what I would have liked to hear today. And so I started doing. And one day Facebook comes along, and I decided, well, maybe other people hear some of what I'd like to hear today. And so I started writing these homilies. And some of my homilies, as I said, are like really very, Bible quoting kind of things. But most of them aren't. Most of them are more, I think, hopefully inspirational, and not dogmatic. So anyway, so I'm going to read you one. And all of them are, like everything I write is kind of based on my strange life. Today's homily. I wear a size 4.5 shoe. Don't laugh. To say it is difficult to find shoes is an understatement. There are only a few companies that make shoes in my size and sell them for a reasonable price. So yeah, most of my shoes are the same basic pump, but in different colors. Really, I have every color of the rainbow of a pump with 2-inch heels, but I digress. The inability to get shoes in different styles has taught me that the shoe industry does not value me. I have been told by my sisters on the other end of the shoe size spectrum that they have the same problem. We are both at the mercy of a system that does not value us. At this point, you may be saying, "Well, Cherri, that's very interesting, but what does it have to do with anything?" See, here's what it has to do with it. I can't change my feet. I can't make them grow. I cannot make my own shoes. I cannot buy the $500 pair of shoes. I'm going to tell you, Jimmy Choo always has my size. And I can't put inner soles in a size 5 and make them fit. Believe me, I cannot do anything to fit into a system that gives me limited options. God gave me these feet. I can't change them. I've lived with the understanding that the shoe industry is not made for me. And that's today's query. What do you do when you realize that something is not made for you? I asked this question because of the lynching of Tyre Nichols. It's been over 30 years since we saw the video of Rodney King getting beat nearly to death by a group of police officers. And we have come full circle. despite all the presidential commissions, Department of Justice investigations, protest marches, local and state efforts to reform training, diversify recruitment, change use of force policies, provide tasers to reduce the use of deadly force. Despite all of these reform efforts, we are here again. And here is the point: an unarmed Black man is beaten to death following a traffic stop by people who are supposed to protect and serve. It is Rodney King Redux. And I am left thinking about my feet and how we cannot expect a system that does not value us to serve us. So you may be thinking, okay, Cherri, how is this a homily? Here's how. Jesus said, you cannot put new wine in old wineskins. The wine will be destroyed and the skins will be destroyed. You see, our efforts to reform is an effort to put new wine in old skins. And like my efforts to find shoes, we need to face the fact that some things don't work and we need to find new vessels. But Jesus understood that calling for new vessels was a dangerous thing. I understand it too. But anyway, here we are. Another murder, another mother mourning, another opportunity for pundits to call for reform. And when you see and hear these things over and over again, please remember my feet. They are at the mercy of a system that does not see their value, just like Tyre Nichols. Y'all have a good week. So that's a homily. I'm gonna read one more homily and hopefully it's a little bit more encouraging. So I don't talk about it much, but I have a pool. I love it. I look out and I see a blue body of water and I feel liberated in a way that's really difficult to explain. You see, I was raised by a single mother in Southeast DC. We lived in an apartment. When I was to be married, have a family, Silver Spring, yeah, really, I was really focused on Silver Spring, and have a pool. It was an absolutely impossible thing in the 1960s. I might as well have dreamed of sprouting wings and taking flight. It was about as likely. Little Black girls didn't own homes. Little Black girls didn't own land. Little Black girls didn't have pools. But I digress. So last week, we had a lightning strike in the backyard. It fried the cable boxes. It fried the lights on the deck and the pool pump. Thank goodness for insurance. But deductibles can be a challenge. I'm retired. We have a fixed income. This was not something in the budget. So why do I bring this up? Because this is life. If you are blessed to achieve your childhood dreams, know that ish can happen. And it is how you regard that stuff that matters. If you regard every bump along the road as an hurdle, you will be unable to embrace your blessings and be unable to connect with the possibilities in your life. So here's the homily part. Know that whatever you face, whatever the challenge, God's got your back. For many years, we had to pick which bills to pay, which creditors to make arrangements with, but I always knew that we would get through it. I always knew that the dreams of a little Black girl could be achieved because I was always crazy enough to believe that God had my back. And so that is what I'm asking you to think about today, to know today that your dreams, no matter how unlikely, can become real. There may be struggles, but you can't ever give up. You cannot ever be discouraged. You are a child of God and are entitled to your dreams. Keep pushing. Never give up. So I wanted to do just one more homily, and then I'm gonna read a story about one of my ancestors, and then I'd be happy to talk about whatever folks want to talk about. Today's homily, have a seat. This might take a minute. As many of you know, I started writing these homilies because I would often find the homily at my church didn't speak to me. So I would write the message I needed to hear and hope it would resonate with others. So I need to report that I've changed churches, and the priest of my new church is truly incredible, animistic. I really love him. I find the messages he delivers to be deeply moving and inspired. I think my Protestant friends would call him anointed. So you may be asking, okay, if all this is state of play, why are you writing a homily? Well, the answer is because he had a lot of ground to cover today, and I can focus on a particular thing. So here we go. One of the amazing things about this time of year is that the natural light is diminished. In this part of the world, our days are shorter and colder. Sometimes it seems that the darkness and cold are all there is. And in this time of darkness, we are reminded to celebrate the light. In Christianity, we celebrate the lighting of the Advent candles. In Judaism, there's a celebration of Hanukkah candles. Each religion acknowledges that light is a symbol of hope and God's grace. And why do we do this? Because of the power of light. Light is the thing that conquers the darkness. Light and darkness cannot coexist. And if you doubt me, flip the switch in a darkened room. No corner remains dark. Light always wins, period. So in this season where darkness seems to reign in the natural world, we need to embrace the power of light in the spiritual world. Light not only illuminates, it reveals the reality that hides in the darkness. If you have ever turned on a light and seen roaches run, you understand exactly what I mean. Light reveals truth. Light can show what was previously hidden. So, as we grapple with whatever darkness that may live in our own lives, please remember that the light of love and truth will reveal the path forward. And once you understand the way forward, let your light be a beacon for others. In this season, it's in light candles to fight the natural dark. Know that the light that lives in you can be a beacon of hope for those who struggle in darkness. Let your light shine. Peace. So I'm gonna tell y'all one more story if you're still with me. And that is about this is from the third category, which is my ancestors. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, my grandmother told me to go to my great-grandmother's house. This was in West Virginia. I was the official errand runner. The houses were on the same street. 2 houses separated them. So I would get a cup of sugar, a bit of flour, etc. from one house and take it to the other house. That was my job. I was 3 years old and I was good at it. One cup of sugar was lost in that half block. On this particular day, I was told to go without a task. I went. When I got to my great-grandmother's house, my great-grandmother introduced me to her Aunt Jane. It was about 1963 or 64, and this woman, Aunt Jane, looked at me and wanted to hug me, and I wasn't having it. I did not understand why this white woman, who looked to be about 100 years old, was coming toward me. I wasn't having it. She was not going to hug me. And I took off running back home. By the time I got home, the phone lines had beaten me there. My grandmother wanted to know why I ran from Aunt Jane. Her that I had not run from Aunt Jane. I had run from a white woman who was trying to hug me, who was 100 years old. And my grandmother told me, no, that was your Aunt Jane. She's not white. And then she told me this, which is really kind of unusual for my grandmother because she didn't really delve into stories a whole lot. But I mean, she would tell them every now and then, but she wasn't a huge storyteller. Aunt Jane had been born during slavery. When her mother, when my mother was a child, she had gone to stay with Jane for a weekend. And during that time, Jane took my mother to the moving pictures, as they call them. She bought the tickets and attempted to enter the theater. The usher said, ma'am, you can sit downstairs section. Well, she said you can sit downstairs, and that meant the white section. But that little pickaninny has to sit up in the crow's nest. That was the upstairs segregated section reserved for Black people. And if you don't know it, pickaninny is a very derogatory term. Feel free to look it up. Jane said, she ain't no pickaninny, and I am colored. And if she can't sit with me, we ain't sitting here at all. Jane then demanded and received a refund. At 3 or 4, I really didn't understand any of this story. My mother would tell me again years later. My grandmother told me to go back and hug Aunt Jane. I think I did, but I'm not entirely sure. But I digress. Aunt Jane died not much later, a few months or so later. And the backstory is this. My great-grandmother's Aunt Jane was born during slavery. Her hue was not the product of consent. And in the days of segregation, she could have passed for white. It would have made her life a lot easier, but she didn't. So what does any of this have to do with anything? This, I hope, is a reminder of our transient nature on this earth. We all can make a choice about being true to ourselves and being authentic, even if it has cost. That's the choice my Aunt Jane made. Living her life as a white woman would have made her life a lot easier. But that would have been a denial of who she was, of what her truth was. And so that kind of courage is often not recognized. She was a woman who understood that to be true to herself, she had to have the courage to speak the truth and demand justice, even when the denial of these things to others could have made her life easier. I hope that we all can remember that kind of uncommon courage in our daily lives. Because it's often those little actions that speak volumes and that save other people. So that's my ancestors. So it is now 8:18, and I'm happy to listen to any questions people may have.
Great. That was really wonderful, Cherri. Let's see. We have I had a couple people ask me a question directly, but let's see. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question or comment for Cherri. You just need to unmute. And someone had asked a question in the chat. Let me go back to it. I was just okay. Daphne, did you have a question or comment?
I think Tiffany has her hand up.
I just
Oh, Tiffany. Okay, I'm scrolling through here. Okay, Tiffany, yes, please go ahead.
okay. You didn't have to cut Daphne off. Hi, everybody. Hi, Cherri.
Hi, Tiffany.
So I just have to say now, I know these stories because I read them, but there is something that happens when you lend your voice to them. And I hope that this doesn't stop here tonight. What stuck out particularly for me is your story about your shoes and what doesn't fit and why it doesn't fit and why it's not changing. Because I have struggled over the last couple of years in recognizing that this society may not fully value me and the people that are around me. And it's been really tough. And I guess I really had to hear and digest I'm a size 4.5 shoe, and it just might not be for me. And what's next after hearing that and chewing on that? So I just wanted to say thank you for a person with ADHD. I have to read everything, but you captivated me from start to finish, and that rarely happens. I can't even watch TV, but I was able to sit here and intently listen to you. So thank you for sharing tonight.
Well, thank you. I appreciate, I appreciate you. I appreciate your comments. The thing that I find, I write these stories because I kind of have to. They get stuck in my head. If you watch the time that they go on, it's always after midnight. And it's usually because by then I'm just tired of fighting and I just sit down. It's like, okay, whatever spirit this is that's trying to channel, fine. I'm just gonna write this down for you. But it's never because I want to, it's because I have to. I have to. And what is the best about this is that people either in the replies or sometimes messaging will then tell me their stories, and that means the world to me, because whatever it is, I mean, I wrote once about um after my mother had passed away, I wrote a story about driving down the road and how we used to sing together. And I went to college with, said, Cherri, I'd forgotten that my father and I did that too. I'd forgotten that we would ride down the road and sing songs. So thank you for helping me to remember that. And so those kinds of things are probably why I keep doing this. Because I'm be honest with you, I would rather just, I'd rather just go and watch Law and Order and call it a night. But I can't do that. So but I appreciate your reading. I really do. I appreciate, I really appreciate when people read them and let me know what they think. I think
Okay, great. Thank you,
Daphne had
Tiffany. Daphne said she's just enjoying the program. She had started writing me that, and she didn't have a comment yet. But I think we have a comment or question from Emily. Let me bring Emily on.
Yeah, hi, Cherri. I've mostly communicated with you over the past few years via Facebook. So this is a question. I'm from a very different background. I'm white, as you can see. But can you explain what it was about your speaking German that got your mother so upset, or did you understand it?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I understood. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it as a grown-up, you know. And so, you know, what it was really about the cultural appropriation of children. You know, it's like my mother did not, it wasn't she was upset about. It was the closeness in the relationship that she was disturbed about. You know, it was not uncommon for people to just for Black people to be able to raise their own children. And I think the same for Native peoples, to be able to raise your own children. There is a cultural necessity for that, that is born of a history of people taking children, people deeming Black or Native parents unqualified, or, you know, there was a whole thing that played into all of that. So it wasn't German per se. It was about, is this woman going to try and take my child? And so when she said, why don't you let us have her? That's when that's why that all just went kablooey. Because that was the confirmation for her. That was the confirmation. That you know, like I said, I think a part of this, but more object than subject, really. You know, Mr. Redmond was the only adult in the room who really understood what everybody was feeling. You know, he was the but you know, I mean, back in those days, you know, men didn't really, you know, get involved in raising children and all. I mean, so he was kind of, you know, he was there to be sort of this cultural ambassador, because Mrs. Redmond really did not understand the layers that she had just stepped into. But he did. And I should say he is from Louisiana. So say his, and bear in mind that he lived every day knowing that they could not leave DC. They could not leave DC. If they left DC, their marriage was illegal. If they left DC, his life was in jeopardy. He was living with a whole lot of stuff about American culture that she didn't know, she didn't understand, and it just, she didn't see it, So yeah, that was, and over, there would be a couple more people over the years who would offer to take me off of her hands. Because back then she was, being a single mother, and you're in the city, and gee, don't you want to make your life easier, and here's this childless couple over here, and they're comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, yeah. So that was the first time she experienced that, but it wouldn't be the last. And so yeah, it was, but that was why it wasn't, yeah.
Now,
that
that
was
part
why.
I definitely understand. Yeah, that would freak me out if someone had said that about my child. Yeah. Even from a different background. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Yes, I could imagine it would be scary for a mother to not, if they see their child learning another language and they can't know what's going on, completely,
Yeah.
regardless
Yeah.
of what language it is. So I could see her fear in that and protecting you.
Yeah.
So we had a comment in the chat from Tara, who I think is your relative.
Cousin. Yeah, she's my cousin.
Tara, can we bring you on to say hello? Where did she go? Okay, here she is. Okay. She's okay, she doesn't want to come on camera. How about just verbally? Did you want to ask your question to Cherri? Just your audio?
Well, her comment in the chat says, would love to hear
Yeah.
more family history about Aunt Jane and great grandma in your future writings and talks. Unfortunately, I don't know much about them. So yeah, we'll see what my memory can dig up.
Great. And I see you have I saw a Branson or two other Bransons on here.
Yeah, we run as a pack, the Bransons.
Did one of your other family members want to say hello? Maybe share a memory?
Well, you have to remember, Lisa, that I think with maybe one exception, the other Bransons that are on this call are probably like a lot younger than me.
I'm not.
There's
Can you hear
Brenda
me?
Branson, who is my aunt, but
Can you hear
yeah.
me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
You can.
Yes, we can.
I couldn't figure out how to get on, but I'd like to hear you speak about how you chose the career path that you chose. What made you choose that career path?
Okay. Okay. So I cannot remember a time when I didn't want to be a lawyer. It's just that simple. I have wanted to be a lawyer since I was probably about 5 years old, and I first saw Perry Mason. Probably sitting up late at night with you watching repeats of Perry Mason. That's probably how somewhere between that and hearing my grandparents talk about Thurgood Marshall and NAACP and how these lawyers were fighting for of people, and the only lawyer I saw was Perry Mason, who I thought was just way cool. And don't ask me why a little Black girl would identify with this middle-aged white man, but I thought Perry Mason was all that in a bag of chips. So I wanted to be a lawyer. That's how I got in my head. And And everything else was really happenstance. I mean, I ended up on Capitol Hill out of sheer happenstance. And everything else after that was just about being open to where my opportunities would take me. When I first went to law school, really, I wanted to do legal aid. I mean, I wanted to come out and do legal aid, and so I got offered 2 legal aid jobs. One was in I actually went to interview, was in some place in Southern Illinois. I can't even remember the name of this little tiny town, but I'm looking around, and I had rented a car for the day because I didn't have a car, and so I finally just asked the guy who was interviewing me. I was like, "Look, are there any Black people that live around here?" And he was like, "No, not really." I was like, "Okay, you know what? I can't take this job. Sorry." Because there was I was not going to be that isolated, period. That was beyond the pale. And so then, be broke and isolated was just like, no, I'm not happening, because legal aid jobs they don't pay a lot of money. And I was willing to, do that, but I wasn't willing to be isolated too. So then I got a second call from from a legal aid office in how's it go? What is it? Apalaca, Florida, or someplace. I can't remember how you pronounce it. So person calls me, I answer the phone. They're like, "Yeah, would you like to come here and work?" And I was like, "Where exactly are you all?" And they said, described it as being near the Everglades in Florida. And I was like, okay. So, and very, predominantly Black community near the Everglades in Florida. And I was like, you know what? This is still really about being isolated. Because I'm probably not going to meet a lot of people that, no, I can't do that. And so luckily, then I got a call from Howard University, and they asked me to, come and teach. And so that was my first job after law school. It was not what I had planned on. As a matter of fact, I haven't had too many jobs that I planned on. And maybe that's why, I write a lot about people being open, because I really had a fun career. But none of that stuff would have happened if I had done what I'd planned on.
And just to extend from that, Cherri, did you feel that the school system was kind of directing you toward another path?
No, you know what? Listen, I went to school in Georgetown.
Right.
So, and I lived in Southeast. Okay. So by the time I was about in like 4th or 5th grade, I really understand that the education I was receiving in Georgetown was vastly different than the education my peers in Southeast were receiving, my peeps in the neighborhood. And so no, I mean, I was I was being taught, along with all the reading, writing, and arithmetic. I was also being taught how to engage in really leadership and self-direction, how to make but most of my friends in my neighborhood quite frankly, were doing I was given, we had independent projects, we had stuff we could figure out, but their education was very narrowly tailored to follow orders. And so no. I benefited greatly being in a part of the school system that was really designed to make sure that kids were not only educated and well socialized, but saw themselves as leaders, and saw their possibilities. So yeah, I have no complaints about my public school education. Until I get to high school, and then they said, well, you can't go to school in Georgetown anymore. We're gonna send your butt back over to Southeast. And I didn't last very long, because my mother said, I don't know what you're doing with your time. It doesn't look to be productive. And she actually took out a loan to pay my tuition to go to all girls Catholic school. Because she was like, nah, girly, you about to waste your life.
Okay. And then, so that was
so
back
yeah.
here in Foggy Bottom, Georgetown neighborhood that you were mentioning.
Yes, that was when I got, I went to Immaculate Conception Academy, which closed down, and the nuns, picked me up and once again, carried me through. They understood that, I had some severe behavior problems that had developed in my year of living dangerously in the public schools. And so the nuns were like, yeah, well, girly, you seem really smart. You got really good scores. You make really great grades, but you got some screws loose. Tell you what, we're going to work with you. Yeah, we're going to get you into college. We're going to work with you because we believe you have value. And they did. They saved my life. They absolutely saved my life.
Oh, wow. Great. And I see Daphne is next with a question.
Yes, thank you. So, hi, Cherri.
Hi.
You have such a lived experience and with rich knowledge. How have you? How does that reflect on you today?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very nice. I appreciate it. I think I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I enjoy and maybe that's why I write stuff. Maybe that's why I write stuff on Facebook. Maybe that's why I need to seriously, sit down and write stuff in other formats. But I don't know that my well, how do I put this? I hope I'm not done living yet. So to me, every day is a new opportunity to really rethink and maybe relearn and revisit some of the things I think I know, some of the think about some of the experiences I've had in my life in a different way. I think people who read, one thing I've learned a long time ago, is that I just tell these stories, right? I don't know what people take from them. I don't know what lessons people learn. I don't know what resonates with people. I know what they mean to me, but I also know that I don't know what they mean to other people. And I think what value, what that, that other people take from them is really what's important. It's really what's important. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, my lived experience is like, hopefully I'm still having these crazy lived experiences. I'm still doing, I'm still, even though I'm retired, I'm still very involved in the community and whatnot. And so, so yeah, hopefully, I will keep trying to remember things and to write down, what I hope is important for other people,
Yeah, I was just thinking that with all that knowledge, as you grow, as we grow old, not even grow old, as we um, evolve through life, that things start, for me, things start to open up even more. I see more wisdom and insight, and I just wanted to get your response on that. So thank
I
you.
know. I
Great.
think that's definitely true. I think, there are things that I don't see now the same way, I saw, in my 20s. I remember when okay, I'll tell you a story. So, so when I was about, I guess maybe about 27, 28, I was out with having drinks with this friend of mine, and she was like, what are you so bummed about? I mean, what is your problem, girlie? And I told her, it's like, things are just not working out the way I thought. I thought by now I'd be married and I'd have a baby and yada yada, and and she looks at me and she said, then when did you come up with this? Like, when I was like, 17, 18. You're like, yeah, you know. And is there anything else you believed when you were 17 or 18 that you still believe? Probably not. Well, then cut that out too. You know, the dreams and hopes and thoughts you had when you were 17 and 18 about how your life was going to work out, guess what? That was stupid. And don't keep even in that stupidity, because at 17 and 18 you didn't know enough to know how you didn't even know what life was going to be, much less how it was going to work out. So yeah, that is when she explained it to me that way, I totally got it. um and I think about that conversation often, because even now, I mean, when I was in my 40s, what I thought about, about what I'd be doing in my 50s was not the way it worked out. You know, that you know, I keep saying it over and over again, but to me, the watchword is be open, because you just never. We as individuals lose a lot by throwing up boundaries and walls that really don't close out anything but our own hopes and dreams and our own possibilities.
Great. And Rhonda had a comment or question. Rhonda, can we bring you on to ask your comment or make your comment or question?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Great. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, bestie.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. I just wanted to tell you that I'm so glad that you are sharing your stories. There's so much value in what you're sharing with everybody. And I also wanted to tell you that you could call me any time of the day or night. when you get triggered by a thought or something that you're reading, so that you can add that particular moment to the stories that you are currently sharing. But I also wanted to ask you when we can expect a book.
Well, thank you very much. I did not pay her to say that, y'all. Yeah, so I don't know. I thought I was gonna do one, and it seems like I'm doing two at the same time, so I'm trying to do one that's just the more religious, inspirational stuff, and then another one that is more the uh childhood kind of stuff. So we'll see. Fingers crossed, and hope that I can remain focused, because that's always been the challenge, because I would rather live life than write about it.
Well, I hope you will continue on the path that you're on. I know, that we've discussed that you don't see the value in you helping other people, sharing your stories, but I'm telling you, you are an inspiration to many. And I think you really need to capture it, in a book, maybe put a little workbook along with what you're doing, because you're triggering things for other people. I have so enjoyed our telephone conversations. I mean, we've been besties forever, and I'm learning things from you that I never knew over the course of, our childhood friendship from since we were 4, 5 years old. I'm learning new things, but I'm also learning that some of these memories are things that maybe you tucked away, you forgot about, and they're now coming to the surface. And I think all things happen for a reason. And I think your purpose here is to share those stories with us.
Well,
so
thank
you
you.
get inspired.
Thank you. I truly appreciate it. And you know me well enough to know that that I do things when I feel like it.
Yes.
So we're, I'm working on it, continue to work on it, and we'll see. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be calling you and saying, where are you?
Okay. Well,
getting
then
this done.
I'm gonna block your number. Okay.
Great. Thanks so much to Rhonda. And I agree with her too. You've got to write a book. I have such a vivid picture of you as a little girl, and it just occurred to me you could even write a children's book with the wisdom and how it molded, how the wisdom of your grandmother and did you say your great grandmother was the one who talked to you too?
Yeah, my great
I knew
grandmother. Yeah.
I also grew up with my great grandma, so we were both blessed to have them in our lives as well. But I could envision a children's book as well. You could go all kinds of directions. There's so much there. And someone did you notice someone asked about your swimming? Wanted you to comment. Did you see the from Phyllis?
Let me look.
She said, please speak on swimming. Cherri, you girl, you're a great swimmer.
Okay.
Any words for Black women who are missing the benefits of swimming?
Yeah, I do swim. I wouldn't call myself a great swimmer. But I do get out there in the pool. And I do swim. My son is a great swimmer. My husband's a pretty good swimmer, but my son is like a little fish. Well, he's not little, he's 26, sorry. But yeah, no, I am not a great swimmer. But I am a good swimmer. And I really, would definitely recommend it. it's not only, a great form of exercise, but there is something incredibly freeing about being underwater. And I think maybe people don't, if you haven't done it, it would be good to try. I know a lot of people have, have fears about water, just like people have fears about dogs. And but there is a freedom in the water, um, that is really unmatched. So no, I wouldn't call myself a great swimmer, but I do get in there and I do, splash around. And I'll be honest with you, the pool thing is really not about swimming. It was never about swimming for me. It was about the beauty of it, That's why the vision in my head as a kid was basically to have this what I really felt was this beautiful thing in my own backyard, but yeah, I definitely swim. I definitely recommend it. And people, especially here in Montgomery County, we have great public pools, and we have kiddie pools, indoor kiddie pools, where I used to take my son. And trust me, there are a lot of adults at the indoor kiddie pool. So, might not be a bad exercise to go through. But yeah, I would recommend it, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Even just for safety reasons, just to even learn to float. I'm always recommending to people who are afraid to swim, just at least know how to float in case you ever get in water and need to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tiffany has her hand up. Tiffany.
Yes, yes, thank you for all the comments reminding her of the book. But I just have to come back and say that your voice lends something to your stories. Please do not forget to narrate and do some spoken, history, because that is what we come from. We come from a legacy of storytellers too. So don't leave that part out. I can't stress that enough. Your voice gave me a whole different something tonight. Like I said, I've read the stories and I got something from them, but your voice just gave it something. So don't forget the narrated part.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Tiffany. I see Brenda Branson has her video on, and maybe she wanted to say hello to her. Is it your cousin?
She's my aunt.
Your aunt? Oh, great.
Well, no,
Hello.
I think I believe I asked my question already, and she did discuss my question. It was about how she chose the path that she chose for her life career.
Okay. And what do you remember about her growing up? What was she like as a little girl?
Very tenacious young lady. Wasn't anything impossible, and sort of a guiding force for older people, myself included.
Terrific. Wow. Great. And are you calling in from the DC area? Are you out in West Virginia?
I'm in West Virginia, Eastern Panhandle, West Virginia, home of
Okay.
Shepherd University.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. That's Cherri's Aunt Brenda. Okay. I see, Martine, did you have a comment or question? I see your video on. You're muted though.
I have really been trying to decide what to ask or say. I'm attracted to and supported by your, I don't know what to call it, nonlinear, exploring approach to life, from which you have pulled such strong, clear messages. And then you're saying you're still learning, still exploring, not through living, open to new things in your future. I'm just as a person who's not all that linear, I'm enjoying, relishing your happiness with your rich life. That's the best I can say it. Just thank you for sharing and being the way you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. There's nothing, yeah, I mean, I think that's why I have the title, but I digress. It is not linear. I mean, that is kind of nature of memory, right? I mean, you see something, do something, it triggers, another thought, and then that goes back to the other thought, and then you come back, I mean, that is to, at least for me, that is pretty much how I think, and I believe that's how most people, engage in memory, right? I mean, when I used to, a long time ago in a place far away, I used to practice criminal law, right? And one thing I knew for sure was that that when people would tell me about what they thought they saw happen, or what occurred that led them to this place in court, what always made me suspicious was when people had a story that was too neat and tidy, because that's not the nature of memory. Memory is not neat and tidy. Memory is, you were crossing the street, you saw the car, oh yeah, right, and there was this lady behind you who did this, that's memory, and that is really, that is why I call it But I Digress, because to me, this is the things I write, I really am pulling out of my memory, and it can't be a linear thing, and I don't want to make them so polished that they seem linear, because you can tell a story any way you want, but I don't want to tell the story straight, I think the movement back and forth, um I hope anyway, helps to give the reader sort of some mental space, because in their mental space, that distraction, if you will, allows them to engage in their own stuff, and then come back to me, and to me, I wouldn't call it a device, but yeah, it's, I know that's how it works for me, and so I hope that's how it works for other people.
Well, it seems to me you have two important places to take your messages. One is to people your age who need to know that they don't have to be through living. There's still a reason and there's still time to rethink, relearn, etc. But I also think there's an important reason to get the message out to people who are beginning their careers, because I think that the way it's done now is to give them an idea that it's very straightforward. You get this training or this degree and you look for this job, and something comes at them at the side and they, I think, often miss it. I do say
Yeah.
this though, recognizing that the younger generation is having a terrible time finding jobs, but that idea of being open to the thing you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
I think many
No.
people know it later on, but they need to know it very early.
I totally agree. And I think it has everything to do with the fact that, it's it's not so much, that I was all enlightened or anything. It's that, quite frankly, money didn't mean that much to me. It's like, it was important. I need to pay bills, loans, they were playing, and all that. But I wasn't, but it didn't mean more to me than doing what I thought was important, that I thought was meaningful. Again, back to my great grandmother, one thing nobody can take from you is your dignity. You got to get out of the way, and so I think we have, and it's not about today's young people. It's true in my age. I mean, my generation, we were all about greed, I mean, we were all about money. But yeah, I mean, it does take the willingness to also accept that you may not succeed. It may not work out. And do you have, can you stand that rain? Can you stand that rain? And that's not a choice anybody wants to make. Nobody wants to feel the rain, So I think it's important for people to be open. I think it's important for people to, as the famous philosopher said, I think it's important for people to follow their bliss, but I also understand why people may be very hesitant to do that, because bills are real, and so yeah, I get it. But yeah, at least in your own, there's a lot of different ways to pursue the stuff that's important. So yeah, be in the regular job that pays the bills, and do something you love on the side. I mean, just be open.
Thank you. This was a lovely discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Martine. And is there anyone else that has a final comment or question for Cherri before we close? One thing that really struck me was that you had such a crystal clear memory of all the positive people and influences, those who loved and supported you. You painted such a clear picture of them, and I'm tingling remembering how you described many of the people, but the ones who you still did remember some of the more negative experiences. And I found that very interesting. You could not remember their name, the bad lady and her daughters. And that's, that's a sign of a healthy mind, in a lot of psychological theories, like focus on the positive. And that's what I'm taking away from your stories here tonight. I think it's great. it's just so interesting. And
Yeah, I think it's fine. Block people, block them out your mind, block them off your Facebook, block them.
Right.
If they're toxic, you don't need them around. Just go ahead and block them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because so many, they say those focused on the future have anxiety, those obsessed with the past have depression. And then focusing on the negative things from the past is really what trips people up and holds them back. And so, yeah, so that's a great lesson for us, to just, focus on the positive like you've done. And it's a testament to your success too. So I hope we can invite you back for more. I'm sure folks want to hear more words of wisdom from you. So,
well,
I'd like to hear more about the middle
I'd be
career.
happy to come back.
great, the middle career. Wonderful, wonderful. We'll consider yourself as with an open invitation from SSTCI. This was kind of a little bit different. We do a variety of things, but you popped out for me and seeing on Facebook and I got a lot of direct messages, and I think somewhere in the general box, people said I really made a great choice in inviting you here tonight, Cherri. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having her.
Thanks.
Yes, and we have a recording
Thank
of
you
this
all.
program. If
Yeah.